Hello, Red Deer Catholic. We're Sharon and Colm Leyne from Warman, Saskatchewan. We are happy to be joining you here today. I'm sure you're probably sick of screens, so we appreciate you taking the time to hear a bit about our story. We're really excited to get to share in this day with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just going to dive right into it. As we were looking at the themes for school division of trusting in God and justice and hospitality, I was like, whoa, what do we do with this? And our pastor kind of bailed us out because he just did a series on life issues, but he rooted it in a discussion of the Cardinal Virtues, which, if memory serves me correct, is one of them. And so we kind of started there. We said, okay, that's a good little place to start. And I thought to start today's, we literally would just go to the Catechism of the Catholic Church and throw down in paragraph 1807 what it says about justice. And I think that leads well actually into hospitality and what it means to trust God in everyday life. So here we go. We're just going to read this verbatim. So justice is the moral virtue that consists in the constant and firm will to give their due to God and neighbor. Justice toward God is called the virtue of religion. Justice toward men disposes one to respect the rights of each and to establish in human relationships the harmony that promotes equity with regard to persons and to the common good. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, but I actually kind of really like it. And specifically, as we were chatting, it was the one line that really struck us. It was right at the beginning where it says, consistent, constant, and firm will to give their due to God and neighbor. And I guess it kind of just really more started with a question. What does it literally mean to give somebody their due? Is it like your library books are overdue, which is in COVID, and to bring them back? But that really, it starts in understanding what we deserve in a certain sense, but not from what we earn, which is kind of in the state of the world, right? Is I worked hard and so I get these marks or I get this raise, but what we deserve in our context of relationship to God is being sons and daughter of God. So that's kind of where we're going. And when we started to really think about where does that play out, where does justice play out, is I think justice really starts at home. Right, the closest to your heart, and justice being just towards yourself, and then to those that you love closest around you. And we look first at others primarily as human and as sons and daughters of God, not for somebody to use, not for somebody to just put up with, but we see them as children of God, as we hope they see us as well.
Seeing their humanity and dignity.
Definitely.
Individually.
And the way that we do this, I guess is what we're proposing here, is it doesn't look the same for every person. We're all unique, we're all wonderful. So what is just towards yourself or our children or my coworker doesn't always necessarily seem fair. And that happens a lot in our household.
Yeah, there is a difference between fair and just. Expectations differ for every single person, and that's why we need to look at the individual as an individual and not lump them as all the same. And this becomes really evident for us as educators of our children, and I guess it fits well as you're all educators, but we homeschool and we have to educate our children differently because their needs there was a thing. Because their needs are different. They're two very different children. Our daughter Jacinta is 10. Our son Ezra is 6. And we have a 1-year-old. So that just kind of throws things off completely. And when we teach Jacinta, she is very bright. She catches on to things very quickly. So a lot of her education is self-guided in a sense. We can give her a topic and she'll go and research. However, because things come easy, she has a tendency to be lazy sometimes. So we have to catch ourselves and remind ourselves we need to push her to go further, to ask more questions, to not just rest on the bare minimum. Ezra, however, takes after me and We're stubborn. We want to get things done right the first time. And if we don't, we get really angry. And we tend to get this negative dialogue in our heads about ourselves. So for Ezra, we teach him the math facts. We teach him science. We teach him how to play piano. But the most important thing we're trying to focus on with Ezra is how to continue to push through even when you struggle, to not give up, and to see the success that comes from that. So for us, that is how we do the just versus fair. If we try to teach Jacinta the same way as Ezra and vice versa, it just wouldn't work for them because they're so different.
Mm-hmm. And this is where we reference an image I'm sure you've maybe even used in your classrooms of, I want to say it's a hockey rink or boards. Anyways, it's like it's a fence. And 3 individuals are trying to see over it, but they're 3 different heights. And so it talks about the difference of equality and justice. Equality is we all give each other a 1-foot stool. Well, one could see to begin with, one couldn't, and one still can't, But justice being we give them the size of stool they need so that they can see. Mm-hmm. What is the goal? And we would say the goal of justice from our Christian perspective, that we in how we treat one another, is honoring their dignity. And giving them what they need to thrive, not just to survive. But that is unique and different in terms of each situation, each individual that we kind of encounter. Mm-hmm. And so this has really framed our thinking, I think, that to be just is and how to do that is a gift to our family and to our workplace and to the children, that we meet there. And frankly, anyone we meet, it really can be a gift to have this perspective of justice. But how do we really know what people's needs are? How do we know how tall they are, to go from that analogy? And the answer is not rocket science. It's basic. It just takes hard work. It's through the context of relationship. Mm. We know this term. We harp on it all the time. I've been a youth minister, for 18 years about, proclaiming the gospel through relationship. But so does the principle and the virtue of justice is played out through relationship. And we do that by creating a safe space for people to feel comfortable expressing and sharing what their needs are. And once they do that, we can respond.
Yeah, and when we first got married, we had all these expectations. We envisioned what we wanted our home to be like. We wanted to be an open door, welcoming everybody. Our kids' friends would want to be at our house all the time. We were fun, hosting all these events with people. However, just like most plans, it didn't go the way we wanted. We were a mess when we first got married. We were trying to figure out how to adult together and, with conflicting ideas on how to do things, just managing paying bills. I was pregnant our first year of marriage, so a lot of morning sickness. Then after Jacinta, I had a couple years of really bad postpartum depression. So that idea of the open door and doing that for other people just wasn't possible. It wasn't our season to do that. We found ourselves relying on other people to help us and support us. And those types of relationships that were closest to us really to guide us. Now, those first few years of our marriage, we had to really focus on just ourselves and our home. And we found ourselves in that position again this year. The doors literally were shut, are shut still for us. And this it was frightening and frustrating and so many emotions. But we were able to see the gift that it gave us to go back to what we had done those first couple years of marriage, to sit back and reflect and see where we were as a family. Sadly, there were a lot of marriages around us, marriages we had looked up to that had been falling apart through this year. And it was eye-opening for us. We were forced, because of this closed door policy now, to look at and ask some sobering questions. Were we healthy? Was our home peaceful? Are we the best versions of ourselves? Do our children feel as though they can trust us with their feelings and to share those feelings? and we found cracks in the foundation we had built, not just with our kids, but with each other and ourselves. And what we had discovered was that we had spent all that time at the beginning to build a strong foundation. Then we were ready to open our doors and do the outside work with other relationships at the expense of kind of neglecting what our family needed and giving our family and our marriage its due time and focus and energy and effort. And we were not being hospitable to ourselves, our marriage and our family, and we needed to work on that.
Yeah, and this kind of leads to the idea of hospitality, which is not an outright religious term. I often, I go and love leadership books, and they talk about hospitality in businesses and culture and all this kind of stuff. But it really does play out in our faith, but I think it just goes under another term. And so as I was flipping through my catechism and looking at different things, and I was like, you know what, it's a fruit of the Holy Spirit, so I'm going to read another chunk there about the fruits of the Spirit from paragraph 1832 of the Catechism, and it just says this: the fruits of the Spirit are perfections that the Holy Spirit forms in us as the first fruits of eternal glory. Really like the first foretaste of heaven, right? Heaven on earth a little bit. It says the tradition of the church lists 12 of them. We would know a lot of them: charity, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, generosity, gentleness, faithfulness, modesty, self-control, and chastity. Hospitality isn't listed there explicitly, but it is under another name. Generosity. I think to be generous is to be hospitable. When we start to think about our experiences of somebody we would call hospitable, or that parish has great hospitality. What does it mean besides donuts and coffee, right? Is giving space, giving of yourself to others. And that takes many shapes and sizes. We have the whole steward title in our thing, right? The idea of time, talent, and treasure. It plays out in a variety of ways. And a practice that I kind of was confronted with a couple of years ago that really made me reflect on, am I a generous person? For me is time. How I literally spend my time is a good sign of how generous you are in your life. And so I was part of a men's group, and I think it was a Lenten exercise. So feel free to do this, because I think you should be a couple of weeks by the time this comes out. We had to track like 24 hours and do it for a week. Just track your day. And we had a little spreadsheet. You're all teachers and educators. You know how to do this. And we plug it in to say, I watch TV for 4 hours, or, talk to my kid for 10 minutes a day, 8 for an hour, whatever. You literally just plot it down. And then you just summarized it and reported back to your group and brought your iPhones and looked at your screen time and were, terrified by how much you played Bejeweled or watched YouTube Star Wars shows. And it wasn't just to feel shame, but it helped us really reflect to say, what we do shows what we value. Mm-hmm. Where is our time spent says a lot about what you're prioritizing, in what ways you're being generous or lacking in it.
Right. So looking at what you value in life, what we value as a family, should reflect how much time is being spent there, right? And if it's not, there's a problem. With our kids, they're pretty even-keeled. So when behavior issues start to boil up, when they're easily frustrated or melting down or fighting with each other, it's not a problem with them. What we do is we then look at our day, our week, the last couple weeks, and we pinpoint, well, how much time have we spent with them? How much quality time have we spent with each of our children? And what we've noticed is the times that they're acting out are a direct reflection of how little time we've spent with them over a course of a week. And we see that as soon as we start being intentional about our time with them, those behavioral issues start to die down. They're a little more patient and a little more kind. But, while we still discipline because the behavior's not good, we are also very upfront with them and say, we know why you're having a difficult time. We know it's because mom and dad haven't spent a lot of time with you, and we're going to work on that. We're going to take some time. And we have to keep going back to that every few weeks or so, because we can lose track through schedules, through lots of events, your busyness at work, or even just me working from home. How much FaceTime am I giving my children? So again, it's a good reflection to do. Where you spend your time will show you what you value.
And as parents, we are asked to live out justice, and to be hospitable, to be generous with the gifts that God has given us, right? And that's our workplaces, that's our careers, that's your beloved, your spouse, but primarily your children, is where it often the rubber hits the road. And I look at a few examples of things that I try to do well that are markers of, if it's been weeks that I haven't done some of this stuff, I know I've kind of lost track. And so it is time, how many real conversations, one-on-one time do we give to our children? That gets harder when more of them start to show up. But it takes intentionality. Also, kind of the world, I work for a parish and do youth ministry, so we kind of have arranged it that I have like a really busy week when I have a lot of events, and then I have the off week. But I have to make sure that I just don't be lazy, play video games on an off week. That's when I need to be really present, to actually show them that I appreciate the sacrifice that they give to let dad go minister to other kids, that they don't see as much of me that week, but they're going to get it in return. Or right now we have them shoved in the basement so we can record this. We really need to show them our gratefulness, right? And be generous with the rest of the day as we talk with them. I love board games. It's my 2021, goal is to play at least some kind of board game or card game with my kids every weekend. Another thing I look at is I love roughhousing. I can go at all the psychology is like, I love tossing kids around and just playing with that and letting them tackle me and feel strong. And they love it. And I also really loved wrestling when I was a kid, so it kind of gives me an excuse to go into that. The other one we do is sleep for 1 minute. And this was a thing that started with our daughter when she was 2.5, when she just said, sleep for 1 more minute, daddy, mommy. And of course it broke our hearts, and we're like, of course, and we cuddled with her. And that's kind of become a thing now is, did you get sleep for 1 minute? We do prayers and lullaby. And sleep for 1 minute, when it's done well, is there's no phone in the room, there's no nothing, it's just us being fully attentive to them. Sometimes now with my 10-year-old, we talk, Marvel, conspiracy theories of the new movies or what's happening. And sometimes it's just cuddling or reading an extra chapter of Narnia together, whatever it is. And sometimes it's 2 minutes or an hour because dad falls asleep or mom needs to decompress the day or whatever it is. And sometimes it's being generous in listening to the nonsensical stories of our 6-year-old son about the plot of Ninjago over 6 seasons and acting like we care and we understand what's being said. Is their children, their passions and interests are not always the same as mine, but I have to show that I'm interested in them. And that means their interest as well. And again, they are different. Their needs will be different. Jacinta loves cuddling. Ezra has to be in the mood. He's
like me.
he's very on or off, right?
Yeah.
Like he either loves you or he wants to see the world burn, right? And you kind of have to work through that. Our little 1-year-old Killian, good luck just trying to contain him or find him for more than 1 minute. He's just running around everywhere. But it's always a good practice to evaluate your home life, whatever state of life you're in. But you need to do the same for yourself and be honest with yourself, I think is real important. Self-awareness is a big thing we're talking about in culture. But we've gone through, not like big T trauma, but trauma. We've had struggles, especially connected to the scandals in the church, being people who worked in the church for a long time. Some of those scandals hitting a lot closer home than others. And I've had the ability to sometimes have to engage and communicate and accompany some victims and of different sorts, or just be aware of stories and how that rests on me and how that affects me. And we've really had to process that. And I think we realized, especially even this last year, that it's not selfish to work on yourself. Mm-hmm. It puts you in a better position to actually be there for people in a healthy way. And I think that's the goal, because there can be a thing in culture of taking care of yourself, but it's for selfish reasons. But if it's getting yourself healthy and in a good place to then be there for others, that's good and that's appropriate. Dealing with our grief and trauma has been a gift to us in the end. Not that we ever wanted it, because it's put us in a place to care and accompany, right, with some of these people. And so we truly can call it a gift now. So checking in on yourself, checking in on your marriage, checking in on your loved ones, especially in these COVID times and other relationships, should be done regularly. Like book like a Monday mental health check-in for yourself or, a friend. And when you see a problem, you need to address it. Mm-hmm. And generally, Sharon goes on this all the time, your gut is pretty honest, and it's pretty wise. So you need to find tools and practices to heal and to mend. And figure out what works. Yeah. And for us, it was bringing back a thing from the first year of marriage in our new honeymoon. I don't know, it's honeymoon 11 to 12 years in. Was this journal that we had where we every day had this kind of tradition for a while of we would have to write 5 things we're grateful for about the other person, and then ask them for one thing. We literally expressed how to give us our due. Which is great for me, the dude, because I never know what she's thinking and I'm kind of clueless sometimes. So when she literally says, you got to give me an hour away from the kids so I can have a bath at night, I know that's how I can give her due, and I can evaluate if I've actually done that or not. So that's been a great little tool we've brought back.
Yeah, and coffee's usually on the grateful list for either of us.
Always.
But the key then, so we talked a lot about evaluating the family and yourself, but you need to find some balance, because we can't remain inward focused. Like you said, the goal needs to be getting yourself good in order to give what you have. And it's tempting to stay inward focused, but God calls us to look outward and to serve our neighbors. And we live in this world now where there's high fences and attached garages. You could go months without seeing your neighbor. That's just the society we live in. And we don't know our neighbors the way that we used to. We rented for 9 years, I believe, after we got married. We were friendly with our neighbors, but we didn't invest in those relationships like we probably should have, because we knew it was temporary. So 2 years ago, when we moved into this house that we're in now, we made it a goal of ours to get to know our neighbors, to build those relationships. We took a page out of the 1950s handbook and baked some muffins and pies and brought them over to our neighbors. We say hello as often as we can, dropping off Christmas cards. There's a young family on one side, retired family on the other, and another few families opposite. We just want to get to know them. We want our children to feel safe in this neighborhood. We want them to know us.
Yeah, and even with our efforts, we're still kind of crappy neighbors, So we still struggle at it. And the reality is it's hard. We have different schedules. They have different schedules. One of our neighbors, he's a shift worker. So it's hard to get our families together and do stuff. Well, we can't right now, but even when we could. And also, let's be real, it's awkward for adults to make friends. I can't say, hey, you want to go play, grounders on the playground. Like, that's weird. That's awkward. We can't get to know each other over tag like my son can. But like we've said before, it's through relationships that we truly discover how we can serve better and we can be more generous. And sometimes all it takes is a hole in the fence. So real quickly, we have a fence with our neighbor and they have a few young boys. And one of the panels fell down and there was just this hole in the fence, and God really worked through this. And the kids led us and we followed. And what happened was my son stalked the other little boy by looking through the fence. And then the other little boy looked through, and sometimes they would talk to each other. And then they started collecting ladybugs together at the fence. And then finally the dads were just like, you can come through the fence. You can come hang out and, pre-COVID madness. And it really, that's how we started to really connect. And then it led to actually a brunch, just finally having them over.
We had the courage to ask them.
Say, let's start with pancakes and bacon and go from there. And we didn't really have any big goals from that. and we were shocked by how much they shared. They shared very vulnerably and opened up on a lot of stuff and some of the struggles they've had, and just looking for affirmation. We were affirmed in a lot of stuff, and it really was unexpected, but it was the perfect example that if we provide space, if we are open, people will share, and in turn we can be generous. So hospitality is sharing just your life, sharing your struggles and your wounds and your joys and your lessons. It's more than just a nice charcuterie platter, as much as I love, some good cheese and sausage from time to time. And sometimes it was me saying, okay, Sharon, I'm going to take care of the kids because I know you have a good friend who's going through real struggle and you need to go take her for coffee, right? So that's the way that I can be generous to serve my neighbors, letting Sharon have the opportunity to go and support and accompany somebody. And in both ways, we're just in giving our neighbors what they need. And it's not always really complicated or difficult.
Shoveling the sidewalk.
Yeah, being a snow angel, little things like that. To live generously is being hospitable, right? You don't need some crazy degree in it. And how much better would the world be, right? If there were just more, maybe we just kept holes in our fences, right? And if we followed our kids' non-judgmental, free-spirited, unrestricted friendships that they foster. If we just followed their lead. And even if you don't have kids, we're all called to step out in faith. And it could be as simple as how you talk to the clerk at the Safeway, or thanking the person who gives you the hand sanitizer. There's so many opportunities and ways for you to show goodness and charity and just giving people their due.
And, it's been a difficult year. That has been texts, how are you doing, or messages, because we couldn't reach out in the way that we would have liked. Just as we were making headway with those neighbors, it sucks that all of a sudden we couldn't meet with them anymore. The kids couldn't play with each other anymore. But we are committed to continuing and working and fostering that relationship going forward, because we know what their needs are now, having met them and engaged with them and building that relationship. We know that we can be there for them, and hopefully in turn they can do the same for us, and be finding ways to be generous. And for our other neighbors who are retired, we keep saying we need to have them over for coffee. Well, we need to actually call them and have them over for coffee and get them to spend time with the kids. That's how we can be generous with them. But why is it so important for us to get to know our neighbors and to be hospitable and just with those around us? And honestly, each time we've had children, I've had a lot of time to think, being up in the middle of the night, 4 or 5 times, breastfeeding. And there are usually 2 big thoughts that are at battle constantly with each other in my head. And I've had a lot of time this year because Killy's only a year. One being, what kind of world have I just brought this child into, especially this past year? The second thought is, how is this child of mine going to change the world I've just brought him into? One of those is filled with hopelessness and despair and fear, and the other is filled with hope. But we all have the ability to be world changers. It doesn't matter how young you are. So we want to lead by example for our children on how they can change the world through relationships, through being generous with their time and talents, and being just to those around them. God gives us the opportunities all the time to practice this, but we do need to start at home with our kids.
Yeah. So as you have this ridiculous season of life that we're in, you have time to think. How are you going to spend it? Assess what you value. Where are you spending your best hours? Are you open? Are you listening to where God may be nudging you to do more, to be better? Are you trusting that the people and situations he has placed in your path are there for a reason? Or are you in a season of life where you need to be the ones asking for help? Trusting in God that he's working through the people in your life and being okay with that, being humble enough and honest about that. World changers. It starts simple, right? Maybe it's just a hole in your fence, right? But it's opening our doors, but opening our hearts a bit more. Treating each other with the dignity that we have as sons and daughters of God. Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of discussion questions, and then I don't know how that's playing out, but they told us to give you some, so here you go. What are 3 to 5 relationships that are essential in your life? Number 2, if you had to guess, how much quality time do you invest each day into those relationships? When you think about your home life, is it peaceful? Is it somewhere you want to be? And is it where others want to be? And if not, why? On an average day, what takes up most of your attention and energy? Are you happy with that? And if you're not, good thing. You control your phone. You don't have to play Bejeweled or whatever you're doing, or watch Star Wars YouTube channels. And finally, if you had one more minute with someone you loved, what would you say? What would you do with them?
And then find those people that you thought of that came to your mind and your heart, and spend that extra minute in your day with them today.
That's how we be generous. That's how we be just.
Thank you.
Thanks.